We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about a very small but super important detail that can change your summer fishing from a grind to a really great day. Stick around, we're going to talk all about it. Oh, I got him. Come on, you. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And you know, there's a lot of guys, including some of my buddies, who tell me they hate bass fishing in the summertime. It's hot, it's miserable, it's muggy. Bass fishing is a grind, they're not catching anything, and they're not having any fun. But myself, I love bass fishing in the summertime. You know, I like every single time I go out on the water, whether I'm going to the big lake, the Hatchet Lake, the Little Lake, the Private Trophy Bass Lake, or wherever I'm headed, I feel like every time is a fresh chance. It's a new chance to discover a new pattern, to put something together and catch a bunch of fish. And every time I leave the lake, I feel like I know just a little bit more about that mystery we call bass patterns and behavior. So whenever I'm fishing, I tend to do things a little bit differently than some of the other guys do. This obviously is common knowledge. I do a lot of wacky things, but they work for me. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm fishing up shallow. Now, I've always been a shallow kind of guy, whether you want to call it a power fisherman. I always just consider myself an old school jig and worm fisherman. But there are other things that I do as well. I can fish from the bank, I can fish from my little boat, and I'm working pretty much the same type of water. I want to work that heavily vegetated water. I want that water to be thick with vegetation, especially during the summertime. Why? Well, because vegetation means oxygen, but it also means cover and shade for those bass to hide. So we've got some of those things that we're looking for already covered. Sure, there's a population of bass out deep. A lot of guys go out there and they catch them with hover rigs and drop shots and deep diving cranks and what have you. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for myself, I figure it's easier, at least for me. Maybe it's muscle memory, maybe it's just how I fish, but for me, it's easier just to go up to the northern part of the lake where it's super shallow, it's super clear, it's one giant hydrilla flat everywhere you look. You guys see this. You know, even underneath the water in various parts of the lake, you're not getting away from that hydrilla. You can see by this video here that I've filmed today, and you can take a look. While there's a little bit of stain in the water, there's a little bit of murkiness in the water, we're still getting over that rain. There's hydrilla everywhere. There is no bare bottom. If that water is 8 feet deep or less, there's hydrilla there. There's hydrilla, and it's everywhere. Now, it may not all be emergent hydrilla. Some of it may still be submergent, may be below the surface, but for the most part, it's coming up through the surface, and it is everywhere. There is no blank spot. But you can use that to your advantage, especially on particular types of days. When it's bluebird skies outside, you know that hydrilla, especially if it's slack calm and there's no current, there's going to be oxygen being produced in those plants. Throw right in there. That's going to be your best chance to find those big girls, as we've talked about, right? I've been firing in there with things like a Texas rig and things like a Waco rig, and I've caught a lot of bass doing that. But today, there's something that I want to show you. It's kind of a little secret thing that I do. Every once in a while, we get a little bit of wind, and it doesn't take much. You know, a little bit of a steady breeze blowing, and there's something you can do with that vegetation that can really spark a great day on the water. What is it? Well, it has to do with how that vegetation interacts with the current. It acts as sort of a breaker. It creates those current seams. And what have we said? We always talk about how well those current seams hold largemouth bass. Think about on a creek or on a river system with smallmouth. You get logs, you get rocks, right? And you're going to have those smallmouth hiding away in those pockets. Even when that current is screaming, you're going to have smallmouth hiding behind where they can dart out, get those food, and go right back in, right? Well, with all that vegetation in the deep south, it's going to be the same thing with largemouth and to a smaller degree with spots. You're going to have spots where that vegetation acts as a breaker to the wind, to the water, and it smooths it out. You'll have waves all the way around, but on the other side of that vegetation, you'll have glass, calm water. Don't believe me? Well, take a look at this video and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, I'm going to show you what I'm doing today and what I'm using to catch my fish with. You hear that we've got quite a bit of wind. We've got a good wind blowing, about 10 miles an hour. But you see how the grass is acting as natural breakers. Back in that pocket is smooth, and right up around this grass tends to be a little bit more smooth. And I'm using that, that's where I'm targeting. I'm using those natural little break lines, those natural little current seams, and that's where I'm putting my bait. I'm able to catch a few fish today doing that. It gives the bass, those largemouth, it gives them a little place to hide in where they can observe what's going on in the current. They don't have to put any effort into moving. You know, it's like no different than, you know, logs or rocks in a stream that smallmouth are going to use to hide behind, you know, as ambush points. And we've caught a few bass today doing that, using that as a target, you know. Just putting it right in there, right in those little current seams right there. Just fishing a weightless fluke or a jerkbait or whatever. A Texas rig, a weightless Senko. You know, just whatever will get you there. And those bass are using those little breaks. You can see them right behind each clump of hydrilla, all of this emergent hydrilla. And for every hydrilla plant you see, there's a whole bunch you can't see. Right around all that area, that water is slick calm. Every one of those hydrilla islands, for lack of a better word, every one of those hydrilla spots acts as a breaker to that current. It creates a current seam. And on the back side of those and all around in them, you can even see where they chain up and kind of make a wall and have a whole area that's slack, calm water. And you can use that to target some really nice bass. You can make it a great place to fish. And what are some of the things that I'm targeting? Well, you can target with a wacky rig. You can target with a Waco rig. You know that I'm going to be throwing a fluke in there. But there's something in particular that I really like to use for that type of situation. And that is, believe it or not, this little crankbait. This is a Bomber Shallow A, and this thing is ancient. This thing's probably older than my boys are, and they're in their 30s. I've had this thing for a very, very long time. And it doesn't dive, but maybe 6 to 8 inches. So I can pull it right around a lot of that emergent and submergent vegetation and not have any problem with it. I can stop it and it floats up, or I can crank it and it comes through the water. It's got a really hard knock to it. It's very small, it's very tiny, so that's good for those fry chasers, the ones that are going after those balls of bait right now. I can use it because if you notice where those bass are busting on your fishery, I know on the Big Lake, those bass are busting right in that slack water area. They're using that slack water as a staging ground because they're hiding behind those plants. And a lot of times you're going to have those minnows coming out of that current and going into that slack water, probably looking to get a rest, get a breather, and those bass are right there waiting for them. Something like this fired right in there, it's crazy, right? You're going to be throwing a build crankbait in 3 feet of water, 4 feet of water that's got vegetation everywhere. I'm telling you, it works, especially with this particular one because it doesn't dive very much. And if I think it's getting too deep in there, if I think there's a risk it's going to be getting caught on that vegetation, I simply stop and let it float back up to the surface. So that's a great way to do it. And even on away from the vegetation. As we move out more away from getting into some deeper water, that vegetation impacts that current as it goes down the lake, especially wind-driven current. It causes it to move in certain ways, and it can cause it to, well, it can be dampened. It acts like a breaker. And as I'm finding the mouth of where that water's coming, right, we find the hardest part of the current, and then you can look to the sides of it, again, along those current seams. Well, again, obviously something like this little jerkbait. And you see this poor little guy. This guy is so beat up. You know, it's what I've been using it for. I've been finding those current seams with it. I've been finding those little pockets with it. Little KVD 200 jerkbait. You know, whoops. Got me in the finger that time, but she didn't get away. Couple of hooks on it. This is a little 2-hook variety. Works great for those little balls of fry that the bass are chasing. And you'll see right along the edge, like we were talking about, that's where those bass are going to be busting up, in those staging areas. Find them. Once you find those areas, it can make your day so much easier. You go from having a grind to catching some really nice bass. Before you're throwing top water in there, you're throwing a spook, a buzzbait, or what have you, and you're not catching anything, you think about it in those terms of what those bass are doing. They're using them as staging areas to catch those small balls of bait, and you're going to have so many opportunities for so many fish catches. Like today, right? Today was a great day for that. I saw, again, bass busting around, and, well, I picked up the good old red spinner, which there's a story behind that, what happened to that in just a second. But I threw that red spinner in the water with that KVD jerkbait on it, and boom, like that, there was a fish right there that I caught. And it was really nice. You know, it lets me know. Now, granted, you know, a 3/4 of a pound, 1 pound fish is nothing to write home about, but it's information. So I was happy to have it. It worked exactly as it should. Granted, not exactly the fish that I wanted, but it proved the pattern was valid. I could use that jerkbait. I could use that soft plastic jerkbait. I could use that bomber shallow A in those types of areas, and I could get bites. So the theory was sound. The methodology was sound. And it worked all day. It worked everywhere I went. Every place that I saw that sort of setup where the current was coming through and I could see the grass getting in the way and causing the current to go around and having the slickness on the backside of it, right in that backside, all in that area, that's where I did all of my damage today. And it lasted even until I came right back up to the boat ramp to put the boat back on the truck. Caught one of the nicest bass of the day. Didn't even expect to do it. I saw bass splashing around, and, well, I happened to have this right next to me. I grabbed it, and I went to work, and I was very happy with the results. We got this weightless fluke tied on. We're going to see if I can do anything with that since my rod fell in the water. My red rod. Got him! Oh, that was not bad. I saw him come up for it. Come here, buddy. Ooh, that's a pretty fish. That's a pretty fish. Oh, I got him right in the eyeball. Come here, come here. I'm gonna get it out of your eyeball. You will be okay when I get done with you. I'm not. There we go. Look at that. Didn't even damage your eyeball. But that's what we've been finding. Oops. No, you don't. Ooh, you're a feisty little guy. You're a feisty good guy. He's over a pound, pushing 1.25 pounds. That's another nice one we've caught today. Another nice one we've caught using that wind to our advantage on the weightless soft plastic jerkbait. The cream jerkbait strikes again. Right, there you go, buddy. And there he goes, back down to the depths. Unfortunately, today's success came with a little bit of a cost. The red spinnerbait, she's gone. It fell off of the boat. I was motoring along, going from point A to point B, and it just slipped right off and fell in the water. It had one of my white Yo-Zuri jerkbaits tied onto it, and that's the part that I don't like, because it's harder and harder to get those jerkbaits. They don't have them much in stock, especially in my area, because everybody knows that old Lowbrow's using them, so a lot of people buy them up. Lost that little red spinning rod, you know, I mean, we've had our good times, we've had our bad times. I didn't like the hook hanger on it. I still have a cut from when that hook hanger grabbed me in the finger when I was setting the hook the other day. But caught a lot of nice fish on it. Caught a lot of nice jerkbait fish and a lot of Waco rig fish. Guess I'm going to have to replace it. But the point of the story is this. When you're out there and you see vegetation and you've got some current, look for how that vegetation, or even rock or laydowns, look how that current gets interrupted by those objects. Okay, target the backside, the slick side, the calm side of that, the slack water. That's where you want to target in that area and bring it in such a way from where they're looking back to them. Because the bass are facing out in that current. They're not facing the rock, they're not facing the vegetation, they're not facing the log, they're looking out into the water. So you got to cast it out to where they can see it and then bring it back to them. Once you do that, you'll catch bass after bass after bass. And hopefully you'll be like me and think, wow, summer's an amazing time to go fishing. So there you have it, a super simple and easy trick that you can use anytime you're out on the water, whether there's wind or whether there's not wind, to turn a bad day on the water into a great day on the water and end up catching a whole lot of bass. Try different techniques, try different presentations, find out what works on your fishery. But I'm telling you, you find those little holes like that, there will be bass in those areas. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.